Hey everyone, this video is a little bit of a pause, a little dystopian weekend viewing, if you will. We're about 2 weeks away from dropping our 5 non-negotiables of the left activist package on our website, and I think it's going to be pretty great. It's going to be a comprehensive overview of policy demands and organizing principles with shareable assets and resources that we've been compiling for months, but really built off years of our work. But I wanted to take a minute to have a conversation about this moment and the idea that the capitalist system is collapsing because it informs the way that we approach the catastrophe that is the Trump administration. The frenetic and chaotic nature of a Trump term is something that the electorate obviously forgot about, and it takes a minute to adjust. But we have been here before. What's different this time is the level of preparedness on the part of the Trump team to exact maximum pain on our institutions with blinding speed. We are entering a new phase of empire, and with it, we're ushering in a new world order, a new global economic order, and a moment of truth for the planet. Now, some are clear-eyed in the moment, even in the midst of this hurricane. Others, not so much. This is for all of you. There are two constituencies among the group that still has a little faith that it's going to work out, or maybe there's a chance that this administration knows what it's doing. So those who hold out hope that our institutions will hold and that this too shall pass. These are people who possess a level of resignation, but acknowledge that this is happening, and it will take years, if not decades, to rebuild. Now, the other exists in a denial camp. They inhale the news of the day, and they try to make sense of it all. And some of them offer excuses and mitigations. I hear them all the time. We were due for a recession, or he'll listen to the markets ultimately because that's what he cares about. Or, I wish he used a scalpel, but at least he's doing something. I mean, government is, after all, filled with waste and abuse. Now, the logic among all of these ideas and camps is built on a fundamental misreading of the circumstances and a belief that, at the end of the day, no one wants to see the United States collapse. No one inside the United States, at least. Half think that Trump is ruthlessly inept, but the system will hold. Now, the other half may think he's inept, but is more, let's say, optimistic that he's onto something. I mean, after all, the sky didn't fall after the first term, right? Right? This is the end game for capitalism, my friends. We are entering something entirely new, unless there is a mass awakening to a single reality. They're doing this on purpose. UNFTR. There are several competing narratives on the left about the moment that we find ourselves in terms of capitalism's history. Yanis Varoufakis describes the dawn of a new era that he terms techno-feudalism, a global economic system whereby tech oligarchs control our increasingly digital lives through ownership of what he calls cloud capital. Entire lives reduced to keystrokes, bits, and bytes. Jody Dean calls what we're entering neo-feudalism. Bernie Sanders and AOC are touring the country right now in the Fighting Oligarchy tour. Now, we've referred to it as corporate colonialism. It's a concept first proposed by a guy named Stanley Dietz, where corporations exert a form of colonial control by embedding their values, priorities, and decision-making processes into the social and political fabric, often at the expense of democratic ideals and the public good. Techno-feudalism, oligarchy, neo-feudalism, corporate colonialism, all variations on a theme that reflect worst-case scenarios, worst-case outcomes marking the end of capitalism. Now, Thomas Piketty's work revealed how the wealthiest people on the planet compound their gains over time relative to the rest of the world, and he rightly pointed out with actual data, which is why his work is so important, it takes us beyond the anecdotal, that rising inequality will lead to mass migration, widespread misery, and worsening poverty. Proponents of capitalism point to longevity. Inhabitants of the industrialized world live longer than they did 100 years ago. Technology has led to abundance and comfort. Had capitalism not taken over the world, we'd all be living in some dystopian Soviet nightmare where bureaucrats disappear people from the streets, masses live in squalor, and the state apparatus controls all of the information and restricts our freedoms. So reconciling these two viewpoints and beliefs is impossible in our media-driven culture. And arguing about them kind of just distracts us from the theft occurring under our noses. Now, we've argued these points from all sides in our work. We've offered theories and theorists, doctrines and ideologies, and opined over systems and outcomes for years on this channel and with our podcast. For example, we've demonstrated repeatedly how the innovations that the donor class points to as triumphs of capitalism are all rooted in government programs and bureaucratic design. Every time capitalism delivers a blow to the middle and lower classes, government intervenes to brush them off and dust them off and get them back on their feet, only to fall into the same cycle over and over again. The so-called free market doesn't intervene to lessen the devastation and rebuild. We've never even had a free market, so it's folly to argue about it. So again, these are the big picture discussions that we have. These arguments have done nothing other than complicate things. And I'm guilty of it more than anyone. So I think it's important to really boil things down to the simplest form. To pause, like we're doing right now, and just talk this out and level set. So let's do that. Let's level set on capitalism so I can prove to you that Trump and the people around him are doing this on purpose, and they just don't care. See, capitalism is not a complete operating system. If you want to say that a global market economy is an operating system, that's one thing. But I think people kind of conflate these. All capitalism is, at its core, is a way of organizing ownership of capital. It's a predetermination of who will own the investment capital and who retains the surplus value of a good or a service, aka who gets the profit. Individuals, corporations, governments. There are a million caveats and nuances, obviously, along the way, but that's what capitalism is at its core. Now, we've determined that nearly every aspect of our republic will serve the interests of capital. That's not a radical statement, mind you. It means that our legal code exists to primarily clarify and preserve property rights, that will levy surcharges on the population in the form of taxes to fund projects that facilitate the flow of capital and goods and provide a common defense of the nation so that our systems can function freely and safely. Of course, there are personal liberties and protections that are enumerated in our Constitution, but the vast majority of the legal code in this country and our client state partners abroad by extension serve the interests of the capital holder. To paraphrase Hyman Roth, this is the system we have chosen. So rather than argue the upsides and downsides, there's one more thing to understand about market systems and capitalism. Market systems under capitalism are designed to fluctuate in boom and bust cycles. If we are, as pretty much everyone acknowledges, entering a recession right now, then know that it's right on time. So this will be the fifth recession of my adult working life. I came into the working world in the early 90s recession, and then the dot-com bubble after that, then the financial crisis, and then COVID. And each one was triggered by something different, but the trigger is beside the point. A modern capitalist market cycle is just that, a cycle. There's a low point, a middle point, and a high point, and then it resets and starts again. And as we've said many times, a recession is thereby a feature, not a bug. It's how we decide to respond in these times that determines the level of pain among the disparate classes. The poorest among us will always suffer the most, followed by the working poor. Our system typically intervenes for short periods to limit the damage, but the damage is still pretty severe. Now, the working class and the middle class can potentially fall into temporary hardship, and it can take years to climb back into the middle class. But extended family members, government support, education, these things usually blunt the impact, at least to a degree. The upper middle class might lose some long-term savings and security and is forced to reboot and reset expectations, but they make it through. But the wealthy, they just keep on keeping on. That's where we find ourselves in this century, and why philosophers and intellectuals are raising the red flag and warning that we're heading into something new. See, since the turn of the century, the pain has deepened and been more widespread. Tax revenues as a percentage of the economy are shrinking, leading to widening inequality. And this capital capture has allowed the top 1% to do what everyone from Piketty to Marx feared. They've taken control of the legal and governmental apparatus and are rewriting the rules to allow them to accumulate even more wealth. I mean, look at the Doge cuts. Elon Musk's team just said that they cut $150 billion from the government budget of $7 trillion. Even if that was true, which it's not, that's nothing. But of that amount, of the amount that is even true, it came from poverty programs like Medicaid and just by firing people. Now, every bust cycle since George W. Bush has required massive government intervention, and every time it gets a little bit bigger until a lot bigger, like we had under COVID. And they use fancy words like stimulus and quantitative easing, but it's government intervention. It's intervention to prevent whole pockets of the lower and working classes from literally living on the streets or just dying. Do you really think this administration is prepared to do the same? Because we're heading into a recession. This is happening. But for the first time, we're going in with a weak dollar, high interest rates, and high inflation, while eliminating benefits and social safety nets. The only other time in our history that we did that was the 1920s. So I recently admonished our listeners and viewers to, quote, read their Dickens, but I picked that up from British trader turned influencer and economist Gary Stevenson, because he's said it over and over again. And so for Americans, I appended this sentiment with a call to read Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives, right? Now, I haven't read Riis or looked at his famous New York City tenement photographs since college, so I decided to eat my own dog food, as they say. On a recent trip to visit my eldest, we spent some time in one of my favorite bookstores. It's a radical bookstore near where she goes to school. And as if by providence, this book was prominently displayed and the first one to catch my eye. It's funny how hive minds work, right? A book from 1890 finding its way back into left consciousness and onto the store shelves in 2025. Now, you do have to get over the overtly racial language, which can be halting to modern sensibilities, but the text still resonates very clearly. This was capitalism's shining era in the United States. It was also one of humanity's worst. See, this is the period that Dickens and Riis were in. This is the period that oligarchs are desperate to reclaim. Don't take my word for it. From the Koch brothers to Milton Friedman to the authors of Project 2025, the industrial age in America is their North Star. They wrote about it and they still write about it constantly. They look back fondly on the days before regulations and worker protections, when children toiled in factories and desperate parents took out life insurance on their heads. This was a real thing. So if one of your kids dies in a factory, at least you can collect a few bucks. Life in the summer months was lived above the skyline, as rooftops were the only safe harbor from the sweltering heat and stench of the windowless rooms below. There was even a hierarchy among poor people. You had the working poor, the disabled, the paupers, and the beggars. And many ended their brief time on this earth in unmarked holes in Potter's Field. But oh, the glory of capitalism. Fortunes could be made through theft, and courts and policemen could be purchased with these ill-gotten gains. There were no formal rules, only the rules of the jungle. Now, moving between classes, strictly prohibited, unless service was to be rendered through indentured servitude. So, when sociologists refer to the creation of a middle class as one of the biggest achievements in history, that's because it truly was. The oligarchs in charge of the country right now are okay with decimating the economic class that took 125 years to build. And yet the optimism among their followers and detractors even remains. Surely they won't burn it all down. The global economy is built on the U.S. consumer. How many times have we heard that? But let me ask you something. Who exactly are we talking about? The single mom living paycheck to paycheck just to pay rent and buy some food? Is she really the one holding the global economy together? Of course not. Today, the top 10% of household income earners, defined as $250,000 and above, is responsible for half of all consumer spending in the United States. So when economists talk about the global economy resting on the back of the U.S. consumer, that's who they're talking about. The gains at the top of the economic spectrum have been so monumental that they can continue to thrive even if everything falls apart around them. Gated communities, armed guards, private health care, their own clean water, breathable air. This will all be available to them just as it was during the time of Reese and Dickens. The lower classes just serve the elites, just like they planned, just as it was. If you die younger, they can handle that. If you spend what time you have living here in squalor, they can handle that too. Education system torn to pieces? Okay. Bridges and tunnels and roads leading to towns across America might fall apart, but the golf courses will be pristine. There are some that have faith that the Trump administration knows what it's doing, that we just need to give it a little time. And I'm one of them, because I think they know exactly what they're doing. So yeah, maybe this is the beginning of a new feudal era. Maybe everything will look like Blade Runner. Is this the end of capitalism? Does it matter what we call it? So what's the point here? Look, ultimately, I just don't want to go quietly into this good night. Diagnosing the problem is easy, but not obvious. So I don't mean to minimize it. But the path forward to me is a bit more obvious once you concede that the elite are building a moat and they're prepared to separate us and kill off the poorest among us. I really believe that. And it's why I'm more animated than ever before. See, we have two wars to win. The civil war in the Democratic Party, where we work to overthrow the Democratic establishment because they think if we just bide our time, the democratic process will put them back in power. But to do what? To slow the inevitable? The problem with them is that they think the government is still in charge. Trump has defied the courts as a citizen and now as president. He's defied Congress. He's cleared the pieces off the board. Do you really think that putting them back on the board will fix everything? So whether you're a capitalist or a socialist, you should be against feudalism, oligarchy, techno-feudalism, or whatever you want to call it. Leftist philosophers have always believed that capitalism's end would usher in a socialist state. But capital's interests, they might be too entrenched. Knowing that they're willing to build the moat and live in the castle means they can keep this up much longer than we can, and much longer than we expected. If a socialist paradigm is unattainable, then we need to beat them at their own game and build something that resembles a grander vision by taking back control of the system before it's too late. The only group that has the apparatus that we need to do this, sadly, is the Democratic Party. So that's where it starts. The party today lacks vision and courage, so much so that I'd say that they're essentially complicit. So we need to build left coalitions that speak clearly and uniformly to demand Medicare for all, the guaranteed right to meaningful work, and housing as a human right, so that we can then work to get money out of politics and center climate in every policy moving forward. Those are the policies and topics that we've committed to, but hopefully it makes more sense now as to why I believe that this is the moment. Either we seize it or we cede it. There's no middle ground. Here endeth the lesson.
Listen to the man who knew we finally had enough. So we started up a podcast and called upon his friends. No matter where you're from or your unique political bent, here's the story of our perfect American man. pass a writer's tears on fucking the